The dust chose her first. It clung to her bare feet, curled into the torn hem of her calico dress, and smeared itself across the bruised skin of her shoulder blades, marking her before the town ever dared to speak her name. Addie Rose Thatcher stood in the chapel yard, arms bound behind her with a frayed rope from the church's feed shed. Her head hung, not from guilt, but from exhaustion. Her throat was dry. The sun pressed down like judgment from heaven itself, and the wooden steps of the church steamed with heat. The townsfolk gathered not for worship, but spectacle. "She's got the devil in her," whispered Mrs. Pilson, clutching her shawl even though the June heat swelled. "Reverend says," she cursed him, raised her hand to authority. Addie did no such thing. She had fled, quietly at dawn, a single bag, her mother's old Bible, and the bruises hidden beneath her sleeves. That was all she carried. But a girl running from a man of God never keeps her innocence in the eyes of the righteous. Reverend Malachi Thatcher stood atop the church steps with his sleeves rolled and a riding crop coiled in his fist. His gray hair caught the sunlight like a halo, if he squinted. Beside him, Mayor Greaves looked away, eyes locked on the dirt street. His silence was consent. "Discipline is mercy," the Reverend said to no one in particular. "The wages of rebellion must be paid before the Lord." Someone in the crowd shifted. A little boy, Tommy Ruckman, barely 10, tried to step forward. He held a folded cloth, shaking in his hands. But his mother yanked him back, whispering, "Not now, child. Let the Lord handle her." Addie didn't cry. She didn't beg. Her face was streaked with dust and sweat, her lower lip split from a previous punishment. Her hair had been chopped unevenly just hours ago, jagged at her jaw, falling in dirty strands across her eyes. She said nothing when the first crack of leather met her skin. She only blinked slowly, as though memorizing the sky for later, if there would be a later. The second strike landed harder. A breath left her mouth. The third, her knees buckled, but she did not scream. That seemed to irritate the Reverend more than anything. He struck a fourth time, harder still. "Look at her," Mrs. Pilson hissed. No remorse, just like her mother. Filth begets filth. From the edge of the gathered crowd, a tall, dark figure stood alone by the trading post. Still, silent, watching. His shadow stretched long across the dust. A Comanche, cloaked in weather hide and sun-worn braids. No one noticed him. Not really. They never did. Or if they did, they looked away. He made no move toward her. Not yet. Addie swayed. Her breath caught on the edge of a moan, but she swallowed it. Her vision was starting to fold, edges curling inward like burnt paper. She remembered a porch swing. She remembered music. She remembered her mother's voice saying, "Don't ever let them teach you shame, Addie girl. You are not their lie." But Mama had been gone 5 years, and the man who'd married her mama for land and piety had turned the house into a sermon and the girl into a prisoner. The fifth strike never landed, because the whip's leather had tangled, miraculously it seemed, in the bent railing of the church's stair. Or maybe it was the way Malachi's hand faltered, just a breath too slow. The wind picked up. The dust curled around Addie's knees, rose in small ghosts beneath her feet. For a moment, she swore the land itself was trying to carry her away. She collapsed to one side, not unconscious, but no longer present. Her body gave before her will did. "She'll learn now," the Reverend muttered, though no one cheered him. Doc Willoughby stepped forward slowly, tugging at his collar. "Let the girl rest," he said, "or you'll kill her, and even your church can't call that holy." Malachi's glare burned hotter than the sun, but he relented. He turned, brushing dust from his sleeves. "Take her to the back barn. Let her sweat it out. Shame is stubborn." 2 boys lifted her under the arms. She didn't fight. She wasn't sure she could move. Her eyes flickered open just enough to see a feather lodge in the corner of the fence, small, black, and soft. Strange. Then the sky again. The barn was dark, the air thick with molasses and sweat. They left her on an old cot behind the sacks of flour. She didn't know how long she lay there. Time melted. Her back burned. Her lips split with thirst. Then came the sound of boots, soft, rhythmic, too careful to be white men's. She turned her head. The Comanche stood in the doorway. His face was carved in shadow unreadable. He held no weapon, only a canteen of water and something wrapped in cloth. Addie tried to rise but failed. Her mouth moved, but no words came. He crossed the threshold. Kneeling, he placed the water beside her hand. Not in it, not on her, no force. She blinked, waiting. He said nothing. His eyes met hers. Deep brown, calm as dusk. He placed a cloth bundle on a wooden crate. A salve, it looked like. He rose and turned. Before leaving, he paused at the door. In a voice like wind through canyon stone, he spoke just 2 words. No more. Then he was gone. She wept, quiet, bitter, ashamed of her tears but unable to hold them. Outside, the dust danced. The wind carried whispers. And someone, somewhere, was finally watching without judgment. She would live through the night. But something had shifted. She didn't know his name yet. Didn't know why he came. But the earth itself seemed to know. The dust had chosen her first. And someone, finally, had chosen not to leave. The first time she saw him by daylight, he was sitting beside a dying mule, brushing its mane with gentler hands than she'd ever been given. No words passed between them, only the sound of breathing, hers, shallow and uncertain, his, steady like the hush of creek water. Addie Rose Thatcher had woken to a dawn less cruel than the one before. The pain in her back throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat, but her skin wasn't cracked open anymore. She lay in the hayloft of Doc Willoughby's side barn, just above the scent of old oats and horseshoes. Her hands trembled when she reached for the water canteen left by the Comanche man. He hadn't returned during the night. She wasn't even sure she hadn't dreamed him. But now, in the low amber light of morning, he was real and there, not 10 feet away. His head was bent to mule as he combed through its knotty mane with fingers that looked like they belonged to a warrior. Scarred, strong, sun-darkened, but moved like those of a man who'd once cradled something breakable. Addie stayed still, not out of fear, more out of the strange quiet between them, as if noise itself would shatter whatever fragile truce the moment held. He stood after a while, wiped his hands on his thigh, and turned toward her without surprise, as if he already knew she was watching. Their eyes met, dark brown, so dark they swallowed the gold light pouring through the cracked boards of the barn. But they weren't empty. There was no judgment in them, no hunger, just quiet. She opened her mouth, searching for a thank you or a question, or even apology for what her kind had done to his. But nothing fit. Words felt crooked in her throat. She looked down. He crossed the barn floor slowly, not trying to hide the sound of his boots in the straw, but not loud either. He stopped just short of her pallet and set down another bundle, this one tied in leather. He untied it, revealing a clay pot of balm and a folded square of damp linen. Without a word, he offered it. Addie took it with shaking fingers. The salve stung at first, then cooled. She swallowed hard. "Thank you," she whispered, not looking at him. He didn't respond, not even a nod. But he didn't leave either. Instead, he stepped to the open barn door and sat on the threshold, watching the sky as if waiting for it to speak. For a long time, she said nothing more, and he said nothing still. But the silence between them had changed shape. It was no longer the silence of isolation, but the silence of shared breath. Later that day, Doc Willoughby came by, scowling at the salve. "That's not for me," he muttered, sniffing it. "But it's working. Must be from the redskin." She bristled. "He's helped me more than the town." Doc leaned against the frame. "That may be, but they won't take kindly to you keeping his company. I didn't ask for their kindness." He paused, then sighed. "Just don't give them another excuse to parade you like livestock." She didn't reply. The doctor left her food and some old linens. That evening, she folded them neatly and left one at the threshold. Unsure if he would come again, he did, night after night, never speaking, never touching. But he left offerings, boiled roots, deer jerky, berries in a wooden bowl. Once, a carved bird, no larger than her thumb, shaped from bone. She didn't know if it meant anything. but she held it tight under her pillow and found she slept deeper that way. Each time she tried to speak, he said nothing back, but his presence became a balm more potent than anything he brought. In a world that had only known her as wicked or ruined, he simply saw her. It unnerved her and soothed her. One evening, just after the moon rose silver and full above the ridge, Addie ventured outside the barn. Her legs ached from stillness. Her body was healing, but her spirit was stiff. He was already there, sitting beside a fire, legs crossed, eyes closed. He opened them when she approached. No alarm, no invitation either, just space. She stood beside the flames and said, "What's your name?" He turned a stick in the fire. Then, after a long while, his voice low and earthbound, said, "Tan." It was the first word he had spoken since that night in the barn. She repeated it, "Tan." It felt like a stone in her mouth, smooth and solid. She stepped closer to the fire. "I'm Addie," she added, even though he must have already known. He nodded once. They watched the flames. She noticed a length of braided cord on his wrist, frayed, old, worn the way someone wears grief. She didn't ask about it. She had grief of her own. After that, he began answering her. Not always, not often, but enough. One night, she asked, "Why are you helping me?" He didn't look at her. "Because they hurt you." "But why does that matter to you?" she asked, voice thin with disbelief. He stirred the fire. "Because they think it shouldn't." She didn't fully understand his meaning, but something in her unclenched, a knot she didn't know she was carrying. She found herself watching him more closely, how he moved, how he carried silence like a cloak, but never used it to distance, how he smelled of smoke and cedar, how he watched the stars like they might answer something. Some days, she braided her hair again. It was short and ragged still, but it felt like a reclamation. Other days, she wept without hiding her face. He never looked away, and never intruded. There were no grand confessions, no songs, no hands grasped in passion. But one morning, she woke to find a single bloom, deep purple, set beside her pillow, the stem wrapped in thread. She pressed it to her lips. A small sound escaped her throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. Later, when he arrived with roots and smoked meat, she smiled without fear. "It's beautiful." He gave her a half nod, eyes steady. She whispered, "You don't have to bring things." He looked toward the hills. "I know." That night, a storm rolled in. Rain fell like fists on the barn roof. She stood just inside the open doorway, watching lightning fork the sky. She thought he wouldn't come. Then she saw him, just beyond the trees, soaked to the bone, unmoving. She stepped into the rain, slow and shaking. "Tan," she whispered. He didn't approach. She crossed the distance, barefoot in the mud. When she reached him, she hesitated. Her hand lifted, hovered just above his chest. He didn't flinch. She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his shoulder, trembling. He didn't speak. He only wrapped his arms around her with the care of someone holding something he'd already lost once. And that night, for the first time in her life, Addie slept while someone else kept watch. Not because they wanted her or needed her or claimed her, but simply because they saw her and chose not to leave. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days, and the town's roads had turned to rivers of mud. From the church steeple to the saloon porch, the whole settlement seemed to sag under the weight of water and whispers. But the rumors traveled dry. They curled under doors, climbed up chimney smoke, and soaked into curtains. "She's with him now," they said, "in his tent, the Comanches, where they say the devil sleeps." Addie Rose knew what they meant, knew the shape of those stairs when she passed near the general store, or dared walk with her shoulders back. The women spat her name like it burned. The men looked and then pretended not to. Even the children were told not to wave. One boy tried, small and brown-eyed, but his mother yanked him back with such force his straw hat tumbled to the dirt. "They'll come for you if you're not careful," Doc Willoughby warned, stitching a cut on her arm from a splinter crate. "They think you're tainted now, same way they thought your mama was." Addie's voice stayed low. They thought she was too soft. She was, and they broke her for it. He knotted the thread, Don't let him see you bend. But she had bent, not to them, but to silence, to Tayan's presence, to the quiet steadiness of being seen and not devoured. Most nights now she slept not in the barn, but under the canvas of Tayan's tent, set deep in the cottonwood grove beyond town. He never asked her to come, never coaxed or led, but he lit the fire, and that somehow had been enough. It wasn't just what he didn't do, it was what he did, the way he left space for her voice, the way he listened without interruption, the way he respected the land like it had a soul. He never touched her skin unless she gave permission, and even then, only gently, brushing leaves from her hair, passing her carved tokens, once steadying her when she slipped crossing the creek. His restraint was not coldness, it was reverence. She had come to crave his stillness, the way he made the world slow down, as if her heartbeat had finally found its rhythm outside of pain. But the town did not slow. It sharpened. A woman named Hester Quinn had seen them gathering, kindling together, Addie with her sleeves rolled and laughter in her throat. By nightfall, Hester had declared proof of sin. "A girl that bold needs cleansing," she said from the pulpit beside the Reverend, who nodded with narrowed eyes. "We offered her grace," Malachi said. She chose shadows. Addie didn't know how to defend herself against the kind of hatred that dressed itself in Scripture. She no longer cared to. Her spine, once bowed by shame, had found a new form. Not pride, just steadiness. But it wasn't only words. One morning, she returned to Grove to find the tent slashed. Not destroyed, but marked. A warning. A trap line severed. A rabbit skinned and pinned to a tree with its eyes open. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Tayan knelt beside the torn canvas, quiet. No anger in his face. Only disappointment. A deeper wound than rage. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head. "Not your shame." But she could feel the fire behind her ribs. The fear rising. "You shouldn't have to protect me." "I'm not," he said, lifting the edge of the tent to examine the damage. "We protect what's sacred." His words held no drama, no performance, just truth. That night, she could not sleep. Rain began to fall again, soft and constant like breath. She sat beside the fire as Tayan cleaned a piece of leather. Her hands shook. "They think you're evil," she said, voice barely a thread. He didn't look up. "They've thought worse. They think I've laid with you." He paused, then set the leather aside. "Have you?" "No." He met her eyes. "Would you if you wanted?" She felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame, but from the way his question carried no pressure. "I don't know," she said honestly. He nodded. "Then we wait." The fire cracked. She reached forward, warming her palms. "Do you miss anyone?" she asked suddenly. His jaw shifted. He pulled a pouch from his satchel. From it, he removed a small pair of child's moccasins, beaded, worn, too small for memory. He laid them in her lap. "My daughter," he said softly. Addie touched them with trembling fingers. "What was her name?" He paused. "Shanina. It means curled leaf in still water." Addie closed her eyes. She must have been gentle. He nodded. She laughed without sound, just a light behind her teeth. The ache in her chest swelled. She felt it in her throat, in the wet corners of her eyes. "I'm sorry." "So am I." She handed them back carefully. As he took them, their fingers brushed. He did not pull away. The next morning, she walked into town for salt. She kept her eyes low, her hat pulled tight, but the air had changed. She could feel it. By the time she reached the trading post, she knew she was being followed. Behind the building, for men waited Greaves, young Tom Ellis, and two she didn't recognize. Their boots were clean, but their eyes were dark with intent. Addie rose. Greaves said, arms folded, "You're living out there with that savage?" She didn't answer. "You really think the law don't stretch past the trees?" Still, she said nothing. He stepped closer. "We could fix you, girl. Just take one night." Her hand clenched around the sack of salt. "Careful," said young Tom. "The devil's in her now." She stared at them, not trembling, not weeping, She was not the girl in the dirt outside the church anymore. "I won't run," she said, "but you'll regret it if you touch me." They laughed, and that was when she saw him, Tayan, standing at the edge of the alleyway, just beyond their notice. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, eyes like storm clouds, steady and full. Greaves stopped laughing first. Then Tom. The other two turned, and something in them broke, not from fear of violence, but because they couldn't name what they saw. Not rage, not madness, just a man who would not kneel, who had buried a child, who had healed a girl they had nearly broken. They stepped back. Addie walked past them, never once turning around. When she reached him, Tayan simply nodded once. She matched his pace. They left the town behind, and as the sun slipped beneath the trees, the wind carried the whispers once more. The devil sleeps in his tent, they say. But Addie knew the truth. Whatever lived in that tent was not darkness. It was the first mercy she had ever known. They came at dusk, when the sky turned copper and the wind carried the scent of smoke. Not from fire, not yet, but from the intention of it. Addie felt it before she saw it. A hush settled across the cottonwoods. Birds fled. The mule tethered near the creek shifted nervously, its ears flicking toward the ridge. Even the air held its breath. Tayan was carving wood beneath the tent awning, his hands calm, as if he hadn't noticed a warning in the wind. But when Addie stepped outside barefoot, her hair braided back, face pale with knowing, he looked up and said only, "It's time." She didn't ask how he knew. She simply nodded. She had dreamt the fire last night, had seen the righteous flames licking through canvas, swallowing the place that had become her sanctuary. The townspeople wouldn't need a reason. They never had. Fear disguised as purity was always enough. She gathered a few things that mattered. The beaded moccasins he kept wrapped in hide, the carved bird he'd once left beside her pillow, a coil of braided thread from her mother's shawl. She tucked them into her skirt pocket. Outside the grove, the first torch flickered into view. 7 men, some masked, some barefaced. Reverend Thatcher stood at the center, a Bible in one hand and a torch in the other. His voice rose like smoke. "This land is ours. This girl is ours. You," he pointed at Tayan, "are a sickness." Addie stepped forward before Tayan could move. "No," she said, her voice loud and even. "I am not yours. I never was." A few of the men faltered. One lowered his torch slightly. "You think sleeping with savages makes you pure again?" Thatcher sneered. "I think what you call purity is just cowardice dressed in scripture." There was a tremor in her hands, but not her voice. Tayan hadn't moved. His blade still rested on his knee. His gaze did not shift from Thatcher's face. "She's bewitched," came a voice in the rear. "The devil's in her." Addie took another step forward. "If mercy is evil, then I welcome it." The Reverend lifted his torch higher. Tayan rose slowly, not in a rush, not in threat, but in the same way a mountain rises from fog, steady, silent, immutable. He walked to Addie's side, and for a moment the world shrank to the sound of wind and dry leaves. No one moved. Then Thatcher cracked the Bible open and shouted, "We shall purge the blight." He threw the torch toward the tent, but it never landed. Tayan stepped forward, caught it midair, and extinguished it in a bucket of creek water before it touched earth. That movement broke the standoff. A man rushed forward, holding a knife. Tayan ducked the first swing, twisted the man's wrist, and dropped into the dirt with terrifying grace. He didn't strike again. He just stood over him, unbothered. "Enough," he said. It was not shouted. It was a word spoken like stone laid on a grave. Something changed in the air. The man on the ground crawled backward. 2 others turned and vanished into the woods. Reverend Thatcher, face blotched red, hissed through his teeth, "She's been ruined." Addie stepped beside Tayan. "No," she said softly. "I've been reborn." She looked at the firewood still stacked by the tent that had once sheltered her broken body. She bent, gathered a few logs, and added them to the pit herself. Tayan lit the flame, not in fear, not in rage, just warmth. Light flickered up onto their faces. They didn't look away from the men. The remaining intruders, just 3 now, stared at the couple uncertain. "She was one of us," muttered one. "No," Addie answered. "I was never yours. I just didn't know it yet." With no violence, with no spectacle, the men turned and left. One by one, only the Reverend remained. The flame cracked in the pit. Tan took a step forward. The Reverend stumbled back. He stared at Addie for a long moment, seeing something he could no longer name. "You think you're safe with him?" he asked. She touched the side of her neck, where the scar from the whip had faded to silver. "I'm not safe. I'm seen. That's worth more." He turned without another word. The night swelled with silence. Addie dropped to her knees near the fire, her body finally giving out. Tayan joined her, wrapping a blanket over her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't stop them," he said. "You did." The fire cracked between them. Sparks danced like stars in retreat. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "You don't have to." For a long while, they sat like that, beside the fire they chose, not the one meant to destroy. When the night deepened, Addie pulled out the beaded moccasins and placed them gently by the fire. "I want to remember her," she said. Tayan nodded. "She would have liked your voice." Addie smiled. "I didn't have one before you." "You always did," he replied. "You just needed silence loud enough to hear it." The stars bled silver across the sky. The grove no longer felt like exile. It felt like home. Spring came soft that year, like the land itself had decided to breathe again. Wildflowers pressed their way through the ash-soaked ground where flames had almost claimed them, and the cottonwoods, those quiet witnesses, stood a little taller, as if proud to have held on to the memory of mercy. Addie Rose Thatcher didn't wear white. She wore pale blue, the color of creek water and forgiveness. The dress was plain, stitched by her own hands from scrap cotton and the hem of a curtain that once hung in the church nursery. It fell to her ankles, fluttered gently in the wind, and clung to her shoulders in the shape of someone who'd stopped running. Tayan waited for her by the river's edge, barefoot on the flat stones. He wore no feathers, no paint, just the same calm stillness she had come to trust more than any vow. In his hand, a strand of horsehair woven with silver thread, no ring, but a binding just the same. There was no crowd, only Doc Willoughby standing to one side, uncomfortable in his coat, squinting at the sky like he didn't want to be caught caring. 2 children watched from the edge of the trees, the same ones Addie had begun to teach letters to using charcoal and bark. One held a carved bird, the other tossed petals in silence, as if someone had told her that's what you do when love gets named. Addie stepped onto the stones. Her feet were steady. She looked into Tayan's eyes, those same quiet, watchful eyes that had never asked for anything, only offered space. "I don't want to be saved," she whispered. "I don't want to be worshipped," he replied. She smiled. "Then let's just be free. Together." He reached for her hand and tied the strand around her wrist. "You'll leave a trail now," he said gently, "even in the wind." She tied a second strand around his, the knot resting above his pulse. "Then you'll never lose me." They did not kiss. They only pressed their foreheads together and closed their eyes. And the river ran quiet, not needing to witness anything more. By afternoon, the tent had been taken down. In its place, a new structure rose from the soil, half frame, half earth, all built by their hands. Tayan carved beams while Addie laid stone. The first room they completed had no door, only a cloth that swayed with the seasons. It faced east, where the sun rose slow and full of promise. Their life was not without hardship. The town never truly forgot, but it quieted. Fear turned to rumor, then to indifference, then, slowly, to something like respect. When Mrs. Pilson fell ill with fever and no one dared touch her, it was Addie who sat by her bedside, wiping her brow and reciting psalms in a voice made firm by compassion. She left before dawn, unnoticed, and never spoke of it. One morning, a boy came running down the ridge, hair wild, cheeks pink. "Reverend Thatcher's dead," he called breathlessly. "Fell sick last week. Gone by morning." Addie didn't flinch. She only stepped outside, hands still dusted with flour, and looked toward the town. No relief, No satisfaction, just the clean silence of something finished. That night, she lit a candle and placed it in the river, watched it drift. "Was he your father?" One of the children asked softly from behind. "No," she said, "just someone who mistook control for love." The wind shifted. The flame flickered, then steadied. By midsummer, the land was blooming. Addie's hands had grown strong from planting. Her back no longer carried the old pain. She sang to herself now, sometimes while braiding her hair, sometimes while shelling beans on the porch. Songs her mother used to hum, and songs she invented herself. Tunes that had no beginning and no end. Tayan carved the cradle one afternoon, even though no child had yet been promised. He didn't explain. He just sanded the edges smooth and placed it near the hearth. Addie ran her fingers along its rim and said, "I like that it waits empty, but not unloved." He nodded but didn't speak. The words weren't needed. One night, lightning forked across the plains, and Addie woke with her heart pounding, not from fear, but from memory. She stepped outside barefoot and found Tayan already watching the sky. "You dreamed it again," he said. "Yes." "Was it burning?" "No," she said, "but I was alone in it." He turned toward her. "You're not." She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "I know, but the past still knocks sometimes." He stepped closer, placed his palm against her cheek. "Let it knock. We don't have to let it in." The storm passed without thunder. They stood there until morning. When the first snow came, Addie opened her arms to it, let it cling to her lashes, melt against her palms. Tayan watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "She's not afraid of winter anymore," he said aloud to no one. That night, they sat by the fire, knees touching. Addie whispered, "What do you think they say about us now?" Tayan stared into the flames. "They say we disappeared." "And what do you say?" He looked at her. "I say we arrived." She rested her head on his shoulder. "We should name this place." "You name it." She thought for a moment. "We'll call it Quiet." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Because it holds everything," she said. "Pain, peace, love, all without shouting." And he understood. Years from now, travelers would pass through that grove and feel something sacred in the hush. They wouldn't know the story, only that the air seemed to cradle them, that the wind there didn't howl. It remembered. And long after Addie's hair turned silver and Tayan's hand slowed, the river still sang, not with sorrow, not with pride, but with the soft, steady voice of those who had learned how to live without asking permission. And for those who dared to listen, it whispered a name, Quiet,